seconds and counting.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. As I'm pretty sure that most of you have probably heard of by now, there are rumors floating around that the Rockets are potentially talking about John Wall for Ben Simmons swap. Again, there's no real credibility to this. I think the credibility of the statement is in question right now, because this isn't coming from a super official source like a Woj or a Shams or something like that. This is coming from Cleveland Cavaliers reporter, but it has sent Rockets social media into a frenzy. A lot of people talking about, do you want Simmons? Do you not want Simmons? And so we're just gonna quickly go over it here. Again, with Ben Simmons, there's a lot of really dynamic facets to this situation, because on one hand, you have a lot of really good upside on the defensive end, playmaking wise, but also you have to look at a lot of the negatives. And again, I think Simmons, as he is right now, probably won't fit, but there are a lot of play style adjustments that he has to make, and I think are also pretty realistic. If we were to trade for him, that could really improve his fit with his team.
Yeah, definitely. And Simmons brings a lot to the table, but he also has polar opposite cons whenever you think let's start with his pros. He is an elite level defender, a top 3 defender in the league, could have won defensive player of the year. And at his young age of, I believe, 24 or 25, he's a high level playmaker. He's able to have the ball in his hand and can create for others really well. Is elite in transition as a 6'10" point forward. He's able to just, bully his way into the paint for easy finishes. And he can, again, I want to really bring back his defense. He can be a defensive anchor. Simmons is really good on the defensive end, especially with perimeter with defense. Yeah, I think he can still work a little bit with his post defense, but at his size at 6'10" and him being an extremely big guy, he can definitely, I feel hold his own when it comes to post defense.
And with Ben Simmons, I think for him, there's just so many little adjustments that you're going to have to make, mainly on the offensive end. I think his defense is fine. I don't think anyone is questioning his defense through all of this trade saga, all of this. I think the question is not Ben Simmons' defense, it's his offense. And with his offense, you're probably going to be looking at him. Definitely, he's going to have to play a lot more off the ball. That's not the question here. With Ben Simmons in Philadelphia, he was more or less the secondary ball handler after Joel Embiid. Notice how it's not scoring. Scoring wise, I think he was the third option scoring wise behind Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris, especially in the postseason. And so scoring wise, we might even see him be like the fourth option scoring wise. I think that's the most realistic, especially in the starting and closing lineups. You're probably going to be looking at him being a third or fourth scoring option, probably fourth behind Jalen Green, Christian Wood, and Kevin Porter Jr. And I think Ben Simmons kind of slides in that fourth spot. But offensively, you're going to be looking at him more as a playmaker, kind of like in that Draymond Green role that that the Golden State Warriors had, with him mainly being a playmaker, a screen setter, and he can be the pick and roll man, or he can be the ball handler. And that is probably what you're going to look with Ben Simmons. That's your best outcome for him, where you don't need to put a lot of scoring pressure on him. And I think that's why this fit is so enticing, because in Philadelphia, you had him, having to do a lot of this heavy lifting scoring wise on the offensive side, because they kind of expected him to be the second scoring option, which it just doesn't seem like Ben Simmons can do. Of course, you can't say that he straight up can't. There is a possibility that he can rediscover it somewhere, but more likely than not, just dealing with the Ben Simmons that we have right now, it's not possible that he can be the second scoring option on a championship team, or really any team that is looking to compete. And so if you can utilize him in a way where he's not really asked to score as much and more allowed to facilitate, more allowed to play off the ball, allowed to set screens, allowed to play make for his teammates, I think that's when you really start to get the most out of Ben Simmons. I think once we stop applying the pressure of scoring onto Ben Simmons, I think that's when you can really get the most out of him, because then you don't have to worry about him, passing up open dunks or, not taking shots in the fourth quarter or something like that. because you have guys who are going to take the big shots. You have Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Christian Wood. These guys are guys who they're not going to be passing up open dunks. They're not going to be scared of the moment. They're not going to be taking one shot in the fourth quarter. And so Simmons can sort of play more to his natural preferences and sort of play more off the ball. I think that's probably the best case scenario for Ben Simmons with the Rockets is in that Draymond Green role where he's playmaking and not really asked to score as much.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you there. The only problem with that, because it sounds amazing in theory, having Simmons as like a defensive anchor for who can play like a Draymond Green right next to Christian Wood and have Christian focus a little bit more on just the offensive side of the ball, knowing he has someone who can, play off ball D and just help out in the paint and be that anchor. It all sounds good in theory. The only problem is with Simmons. I don't think he is the type of person who's just going to accept being the third option on a team like that because he had the ball in his hand. He has that like mentality of, hey, I want to be like a Magic Johnson kind of player, a guy who like couldn't shoot too well, but he was able to facilitate and he was able to win. But it's just not gonna happen with any team. We learned that in today's NBA, you can't play like a Magic Johnson and not have any type of shooting consistency and expect to carry an offense. You need to be very versatile. And Simmons has every single thing outside of shooting. That's the whole part. So if he is able to be like a Draymond Green and play in his type of role where he's able to set screens, play be both the pick and roll ball handler and the pick and roll roller, as well as, just amazing defense and just anchor and just take the gravitating defenders towards him and taking the pressure off our guys like Kevin Porter Jr., like a Jalen Green, like Christian Wood, and opening space on the court for them, opening themselves up for easier shots. He could definitely be even better than how we saw Draymond Green playing. The only thing is, I do not think Simmons is the type of player who's just going to be accepting of that. And if he is not willing to accept that type of role, I do not want him on my team on the Houston Rockets because all he would end up doing then is taking touches away from Kevin Porter Jr. and just he would make our offense the same like Philadelphia. He would have the ball, everyone else just space out, and he will run the offense. It doesn't work. Every team in the league knows how to guard that, and if that's the case, then he's just going to become an offensive liability in the playoffs like he did again, and like he has been for the past 3 years. Because this is not just one playoff, one like postseason that Ben Simmons has been like not playing well in. Every single postseason since I believe his sophomore year, he's been going down in points. He went from like 17 to 14 and now to like 11. It's just he's getting worse because teams are finding out how to guard him and how to guard him as the ball handler. So if he cannot agree to become that like secondary ball handler and just focus more on his defense and what he can do off ball, he's not going to be a good fit for the Rockets.
Yeah, I think the main situation here is really his mentality, because that's what's really come into question over this offseason and just through the postseason is his mind in the right place? Not that he's fine, but it's that his basketball mindset is it in the right place? Like, is he really willing to do whatever it takes to win, or is he just trying to get a name for himself and sort of have this me over we or sorry, myself over the team type of mindset. And that's what's really come into question over his time in Philadelphia because you're hearing all of this talk of, like you said, he wants to be like this Magic Johnson type of player where the offense is running through him. And so with that, you kind of question, is his mind in the right place as far as his willingness to win and his ability to sacrifice to win? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a guy, especially on this team that's a rebuilding team, the culture and getting players who fit that culture is so important. And so with Ben Simmons, you're kind of questioning that is he fitting this culture of we have all of these guys who with chips on their shoulders who really are willing to do everything it takes to be the best player that they can and the best team that they can do the best thing for their team. So you kind of question if Ben Simmons is going to come in. Is he really going to be willing to adapt to that culture? Is he really going to be willing to do whatever it takes to win and sort of fit in that culture? And that's really the real question here. It's not really his talent. No one is denying his talent. We all know the type of player that Ben Simmons is. We know that he's an all-star caliber player. We know that he's a defensive player of the year caliber player. But I think the mentality is the question here. And I think if he can't get that mentality in the right place, I think it's really hard to justify a Ben Simmons trade because I don't think that that locker room fit and just the the personalities, the mindsets of Ben Simmons and the rest of the team kind of clash, and that in itself really does hurt the team a lot. And so I don't think that Ben Simmons is going to be able to be successful on this team. And I don't think this team will be successful with Ben Simmons if he's not going to be able to change his mindset. Now, if he does change his mindset and he does agree to, set aside his time in Philly and just forget that and sort of go clean slate and just look to get a new future with the Rockets. I think that can really be productive because of all of this talent that he has. If he can utilize it, get his mind in the right place, I think it's going to be really, really good for us. But again, let's just take a quick look now at his contract because this is another really important thing to look at. Ben Simmons is on a really, really big contract. And I think with Simmons, trading for him does also kind of handicap us in the future in how much cap space that we have to sign big name free agents or even just role players to help address needs on the team.
Yeah, so when you look at like the Simmons contract and the Wall contracts, Ben Simmons is making about 140, $145 million over the next 4 years. And like that Ben Simmons, again, he is the third best player on a championship team. But does he deserve to get max money? Because you can think of it as like the Tobias Harris contract in Philadelphia. Tobias Harris is the third best player in Philadelphia, but he's making $30 million. Does he deserve that money? No, he's still a great player and deserves like 20 mil, but he does not deserve 30 mil. And then that's the same like mentality you should think about when you think of the Ben Simmons contract. And now when you compare with the John Wall contract, who's making about $91 million over the next 2 years, John Wall's contract, at least it ends in 2 years. And that 2 years is inclusive of if he decides to accept and come into his player option. So really, it's just a matter of like, what do you want to do? Do you want to get rid of Wall's contract, which ends in 2 years? Because that would give you more cap flexibility in 2023, which is supposedly a really, really good draft, or not draft, a free agency class with a lot of big names, as well as a multitude of great role players and just like starters. So there are guys there like Zion, like Jokic, like LeBron, Kyrie, Harden, etc. I'm not saying the Rockets should just go for like those big names. But if we can't get one of those big names, a lot of like role players and solid starters are still there. Guys like Malcolm Brogdon, Fred Van Vliet, Jeremy Grant, the Bogdanovich, Miles Turner, all these guys who the Rockets can sign for like around 15 to 20 mil. So really, our options would be if instead of trading for Simmons in 2023, once we've let our young core develop, and not to mention that if we let our young core develop, we would most likely not be a winning team and still have a pretty high draft pick in this year's upcoming draft. And this draft upcoming is very forward and like center oriented with like a lot of great defensive anchors, guys like Jalen Duran and Paul Banchero who are like perfect fits next to Christian Wood. But that's just like something else. Back to the free agency class, we could spend it and get like three guys. Would you rather like to have Ben Simmons right now, or in 2023 bring in guys like Malcolm Brogdon, Jeremy Grant, and um Bojan Bogdanovic? Those three. Like personally, I would rather have the three because it gives us more depth, gives us more versatility, gives us more, just action, more like whatever we can run. Having more depth, more shot creators, more scorers off our bench when our guys get tired or whenever they're like doubling, it really just makes it even harder for the other team because, like, hey, no, I can't double Jalen Green because then all these other guys are out there and they're going to get their shots. And it just makes the Rockets a lot better and a lot harder to guard. So that's the only other like main argument I really have if Ben Simmons really is not able to come and to the Rockets with a new start, new mentality of, hey, I want to forget what happened in Philadelphia. I'm here now. This is my new home. I want to work with these guys because everyone on the Rockets has this underdog. Hey, I'll have something to prove mentality. Jalen Green thinks he should have been number one overall. That's his thing. Kevin Porter Jr. has his locker room issues. Christian Wood was undrafted. Jay Tate was undrafted. Cade Martin came from the 50 like third or 57th pick. All these guys that the Rockets have, they all have something to prove. If Ben Simmons can fit with that culture, he would be the perfect player to pair alongside Christian Wood. But if he's not, and most likely I do not think he will be, then just keep Wall for now. Find another trade for him. Send him wherever he wants to go. Take back smaller contracts that are like contracts that end this year, and just focus on rebuilding our young guys and having cap flexibility for 2023, because that 2023 draft free agency class is one that the Rockets can definitely really benefit from.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't even have to be, role players, or I guess it doesn't have to be the veteran role players either. Like you can go after the younger guys, like a Cam Reddish. That's something that you can do. It just opens up a lot more options without Ben Simmons. Whereas with Ben Simmons, you're kind of restricted to just one max slot, and so now you're thinking about, you're kind of having to choose between signing one really good, like all-star caliber or superstar caliber player, or you're looking at signing like two two role players, something like that, two starter caliber or bench caliber players, rotation caliber players. And that kind of dilemma, I think it really comes down to how confident the front office is in their ability to sign a big name free agent in that 2023 offseason. And if they feel like, yeah, they can go out and snag an all-star in that free agency class, they'll probably, relax on a Ben Simmons trade and instead opt to keep that cap flexibility, write out John Wall's contract, and then with that cap flexibility, they can either go after a bunch of really good role players or try to snag a big name free agent and sort of make this team a really top tier contender. Because at that time, you're going to assume Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. are progressing, all these young guys are progressing, and then adding that all star is that one piece that's going to elevate you, kind of like what happened with Chris Paul in Phoenix. I think that's probably what you're going to look to do with this squad. Get that one veteran mentor, veteran point guard, veteran guard type of guy who can really elevate you to that next level. And I think that's what Rafael Sol might look to do. But if he doesn't see that as a likely possibility, then I think you get Ben Simmons, and Simmons is still young enough in that he can grow with this core. He is around the same age as Christian Wood, and so age is not the problem here. As long as he can get that fit worked out, I think Ben Simmons trade is fine, as long as Stone feels like they don't really need, or he doesn't feel like they are going to be able to snag a superstar player or a bunch of really good role players. I think this trade is a lot more logical and a lot more reasonable. Now, looking at some more possible trades here, because we are obviously trading, looking at some trades here, let's take a look at one mock trade, which would be giving up John Wall, Daniel House, and Milwaukee and Brooklyn first round picks from 2023 to Philadelphia for Ben Simmons and maybe Matisse Thybulle. Thybulle's probably unlikely. I doubt they give up Simmons and Thybulle, especially for just Wall and House and also some picks. But again, Thybulle would be a dream. Like that's probably the best case scenario. But honestly, I think this is a good enough trade package even for Simmons alone.
Yeah, and again, this is just very simple. I feel like if the Rockets were to make this trade, I have like I think two conditions that the Rockets must, or three conditions that they must focus on. Okay, first condition is I do not want to give more than two draft picks, and second condition is those draft picks cannot be after 2023. So if I'm thinking of these draft picks, they cannot be our draft picks. They have to be either Milwaukee's, Miami's, or Brooklyn's picks until 2023. Because relatively, I think, well, besides Miami, I think Miami might fall off like kind of soon. But Milwaukee and Brooklyn are definitely teams that until 2023, they're still going to be very good. They still have KD, they still have Harden, they still have Kyrie. They're good. Milwaukee has Giannis. If you have Giannis, you're automatically an amazing team, etc. So these are going to be late first round picks. I would not want to give anything else because in 2024 and in 2026, the Rockets already owe their picks to Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City has a swap right, so I definitely don't want them to even touch or even mention our the Rockets draft picks, as well as Wall and House are great. They're win now players, and we don't know exactly what Daryl Morey wants. Whether he wants to flip Ben Simmons for an All Star caliber player who can play now, or whether he wants to flip him for assets and maybe use those assets in like a Damian Lillard trade, or just have that whole process thing like rebuild again. We don't know what Daryl Morey wants, but if he does want like a win now player, a guy like John Wall, a guy like Daniel House, and these two picks would be a really good investment in for Ben Simmons. I don't know if this trade is going to go down because there are reports that teams like um, Minnesota, Cleveland, Sacramento, the Warriors, they all have like a little better offers, but if this is what it takes to bring Simmons and I'm really emphasizing this, and he agrees to be a part of our culture and change his mentality to be a team player and work with Silas's offense, then and only then am I okay with this trade because it's actually a really good trade. Only if Simmons is agreeing to really focus and work with the team on how they want to play him and not have that I want this whole offense to run through me mentality. But if we can get this done, I think it's amazing trade, and honestly, it's a slap in the face to Daryl Morey because he could have had Harden for Simmons and I think Maxi, or Simmons, Thibault, and Maxi, or something like that. And instead, he's getting John Wall and Daniel House. So, you know, Raphael Stone he's a finesse god. He knows what he's doing. I trust Stone in making the right decision. But if this was to go down, I would have mixed thoughts about it. But I think I'd eventually, get over it.
Yeah, and again, like you said, it's crazy that this January you're looking at Simmons for Harden, and now in just a span of like what 8 9 months, you're looking at Simmons for John Wall, which is just that's incredible how much his trade value has fallen. Also, how I think goes to show this kind of says something on Daryl Murray. He was one Tyrese Maxey away from getting James Harden for Ben Simmons, and now you're looking at him possibly having to settle for John Wall. I mean, it's not even just James Harden. It's all of the other guys that he could have gotten. There were talks about D'Angelo Russell. There were talks about Malcolm Brogdon, and now you're looking at John Wall. And so again, it's nothing against John Wall. It's just saying that I don't think anyone doubts at this stage in their careers that um, D'Angelo Russell, Malcolm Brogdon are better than John Wall. But again, the fact that he could have had even those guys, forget Harden, he could have had D'Angelo Russell, he could have had Malcolm Brogdon, but now you're possibly looking at him settling probably either for John Wall or what, like Malik Beasley, Jaden McDaniels from Minnesota, from Sacramento. I don't know. You're probably looking at package probably revolving around maybe Marvin Bagley or Rashawn Holmes or something like that. It's really kind of funny how far Daryl Morey has fallen in his trade package or his trade considerations with Ben Simmons, where you were looking at him, Damian Lillard or James Harden, and now you're looking at Malik Beasley, John Wall, Rashawn Holmes, something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of a statement, bit of a slap in the face for, like you said, for Daryl Morey. Again, one thing that I think should be borderline, sort of outlined in this trade, is that no Tate, no young core players are going to be given up for Ben Simmons. No, any of our picks, whether it be like 5 years down the line or like 2 years down the line, none of our picks should be given up. I don't think we should give up any of the Brooklyn picks past 2024 either, because it seems like Harden and Kyrie are getting extended, but again, that is not it's not official till it's official. And so I think you're probably looking at a situation where you shouldn't and probably don't want to give up any of the young core players, any of our picks, obviously, and also none of the Brooklyn picks beyond 2024. But just a quick note before we wrap it up, assuming that the trade goes through, you're looking at basically Rafael Stone has traded James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and Robert Covington for Christian Wood, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. because of because of the locker room situation with Taurean Prince in Cleveland that led to Kevin Porter Jr. sort of forcing his way out of Cleveland. Sengun because of the Detroit Pistons protected pick and the Washington Wizards protected pick that we got in the Westbrook John Wall swap. Um, the entire Nets future up to like 2027 or 2028, and Ben Simmons for James Harden, who was in a trade request and playing out of shape and sort of trying to force his way out. Russell Westbrook, who was just coming off of a torn quad and off of probably one of the worst playoffs of his career, and Robert Covington, he is good, but he was going to have to go anyway because of the rebuild. And you get all of these young core pieces, a lot of the young core pieces coming from this uh, trade. Even Usman Garuba coming from the Covington deal because of the first round pick that was sent in this deal for Robert Covington. So Usman Garuba is also a part of this. A lot of the young core and also potentially Ben Simmons could be coming from just James Harden and Russell Westbrook and Robert Covington. I think for all the teams that got these guys, the Wizards, they're not the Rockets, the Nets, and the Trailblazers, I think they got all what they needed. I mean, the Nets are now a top tier championship contender. The Wizards made it back to the playoffs and now have shipped off Westbrook for a lot of depth for them to help compete around Bradley Beal. And the Portland Trailblazers have added a nice piece around Damian Lillard. Wasn't enough for them last year, but who knows? Maybe this year their fortunes are different. And for us, we now have one of the brightest futures in the league and got rid of some players who wanted out and some players who just didn't fit the timeline. I think, all in all, regardless of what happens with this Ben Simmons deal, I think Raphael Stone has done a really, really good job so far. And I think all of us sort of owe to trust him. I personally don't know if I would want Ben Simmons on this team or not. I mean, if he's willing to change his mentality, change his mindset, I'm all for it. But until then, I am probably going to be against a Ben Simmons trade. I'd rather ride out John Wall's contract than take a risk with Ben Simmons, and a really big risk too, because if this doesn't work, you're stuck with this contract for a very, very long time. You sort of handicaps you for a very, very long time. And so it's a big risk that I'm not sure if I'm willing to take until I can see that Ben Simmons is willing to change his mindset in this new situation.
Yeah, pretty much. You wrapped it up perfectly. Um, again, I have the exact same thoughts. If Ben Simmons is willing to trade change his mentality, then I'm all for it. If not, I'm sorry, find a home in Minnesota or something, but just you're not taking touches away from our backcourt. You're not stunting Kevin Porter Jr.'s development. You're not, you know, making yourself unplayable in the playoffs. You have a lot of cons, a lot of flaws that you really need to address with your shooting. And if you can't work with Silas's system, which by the way I forgot to mention, Silas is amazing at getting players to reach their full potential, and like especially with big men. You saw what happened with Kelly Olynyk and how he had a career year playing under Silas. Silas is definitely a type of player who can who can turn Ben Simmons into an actual offensive threat. It might not be through shooting, but it will be somehow he will do it. And then John Lucas is our developmental coach is someone who can really, get to Ben Simmons. He was able to get through Kevin Porter Jr. during all of his issues and all that. He would do the same with Ben Simmons. Hey, forget Philly, forget everything. You're in a new place, new home. Focus on the now. Focus on the future. We got you. If you bomb with this team and you have their back, they're going to have your back. And this is a championship team down the road. There's no doubt about it. The future is so bright for the Houston Rockets. And yeah, man, I think that's my final thoughts on this.
Yeah, and again, this was a bit of a longer one because again, there's so much to analyze for a Ben Simmons deal. There's so many caveats, so many facets of a potential deal that I think it's probably better that we go into in depth about all of these because there's just so much to talk about and there's so many things that you have to consider in a potential Ben Simmons deal. And we hope that with this, let us know down in the comment section after this. Do you want Ben Simmons or are you against a Ben Simmons trade? Let us know down in the comment section how you would feel about that. And as always, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. I'm Joel, and I was joined here today with DJ. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.